What's the first character you think of when someone mentions Nintendo? 9 times out of 10 it's probably going to be Mario or Zelda. I know that's what I would say. These two games are a staple in the Nintendo universe, so it's an obvious answer. With the Switch console being around for a little over 7 years, there's a pretty big repertoire of games that have been created. Most of the big hitters are one of these two heroes, so today we're going to be shining some light on the best games for the Switch that aren't Mario or Zelda. As much as I love their games, I think there's some other major titles out there that deserve some love too. Although originally released on the Wii U for the total of 17 people that bought that console, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is making an appearance on this list. Often being overshadowed by Mario when it comes to 2D platformers, the Donkey Kong franchise has always delivered banger after banger after banger, and Tropical Freeze was no different. You're immediately consumed by the level design right from the start. The vibrant graphics of all the minute details never suffered at any point through the entire playthrough, arguably being one of the best looking games on Switch. Often, the background of the levels look just as good as the foreground and sometimes even better, almost making you feel bad for not stopping to appreciate it. Maybe the only thing in Tropical Freeze that can compete with the level design is the music. Each level has its own unique soundtrack that sets it apart from all else, so if the visuals don't get you to stop and enjoy the ambiance, the music definitely will. Honestly, Tropical Freeze might be the pinnacle of 2D platformers. It brings so many elements from the previous Donkey Kong games and just builds on them perfectly. I'm so glad this game got a second chance by being brought to the Switch, and it's worth every penny. Fire Emblem Engage is probably the best addition to the franchise in a long time. With Three Houses being the first Fire Emblem game for Switch, I was bummed when I really wasn't a fan of it. However, Engage is the game I needed to be all in on the Fire Emblem franchise again. I felt that Three Houses added a lot of features to the game that made it feel cluttered and overwhelming, like social aspects and time management. Engage brings back what's most important to the series, and that's combat. But in between missions you can still explore the world, create bonds with your team, and take part in side activities. While this game can be enjoyed in its most bare-bone forms of just attacking enemies with little strategy, the added challenge and enjoyment really derives from strategically powering up your team and outsmarting your enemies to thwart their plans. While I really wasn't a fan of having to kill bosses multiple times in a single level, Fire Emblem Engage definitely makes combat equal parts challenging as they are rewarding. On top of that, the game adds hundreds of gameplay options to use different characters to test out and have fun with new playstyles. While there's been a lot of Kirby games over the course of many years, some very good and some not so much, Kirby and the Forgotten Land was a refreshing addition to the 3D platformer category. While Forgotten Land keeps a lot of its traditional Kirby elements like sucking up enemies to get their powers or fighting familiar bosses, there is no mistaking this edition for any other Kirby game, and it's truly unique in every way. The platforming mechanics are relatively simple, but the level design is so immersed that the player gets lost in exploring every part. Levels have plenty of depth to keep you invested, but still simple enough to not feel overwhelmed when you're trying to uncover all the hidden details. While using the power of the Waddle Dees you rescue along the way, you can upgrade your power-ups to make them stronger and give you a better fighting chance, which begs the question of why we haven't gotten this kind of Kirby game sooner. Kirby and the Forgotten Land actually has a pretty decent post-game too. Collecting all the shards from previous levels unlocks a new final boss for extra fun. Each level also has its own unique missions to challenge all the completionists out there. Overall, Forgotten Land is the game that Kirby needed and deserved. The graphics and performance were so crisp and spectacular, while the OST had you bopping along your entire journey. Nintendo really set the bar with this one, and it'll surely be hard to top for future Kirby games. Metroid Dread was the first modern Metroid game we had seen since 2017 with Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS. Nintendo showed up in a major way with this game that was a smash hit in every way. Hailed as possibly the best Metroid game to date, Metroid Dread has sold over 3 million copies and has won multiple awards and nominated for many others. While not that lengthy of a game, coming in at around 10 to 15 hours to complete, Dread is jam-packed with fun combat and vibrant level exploration. The difficulty is there even on a normal playthrough, but since its release there has been 2 more difficulty options added to make it even more challenging. Controls feel tight as you zip and bounce your way through levels and boss fights. Like classic Metroid games, power-ups unlock new parts of current and old areas, giving you the huge feeling of completion when you're able to finally clear out all the nooks and crannies of each one. It really feels like Nintendo went back to its roots with the 2D Metroid franchise, and it shows in every way. Metroid Dread is a perfect place for longtime fans of the series, and especially first-time players. On top of that, it has a fair amount of replayability. It's not only on the list for this video, but I would argue it's one of the best games for Switch games in general. It's clear that Nintendo has brought the Metroid franchise back, and with Metroid Dread being this good, I'm beyond excited to see what Metroid Prime 4 has in store for us. Also, shout out to Nintendo for making one of the scariest enemies in a Metroid game. Pikmin is one of my favorite franchises of all time, so that's why it's number 1 for this list. Although the game has a slow start, frequently being interrupted by NPCs and starting tutorials, it quickly jumps back into the Pikmin groove when finally letting you off the leash. Pikmin 4 envelops you in a world of realism and artistry that make you feel like you're actually controlling a small army of tiny minions. You feel immersed in a world of serenity while also needing to spring into action when suddenly faced with enemies that pop out of nowhere or are 5 times your size. Pikmin 4 adds fun new features to make you feel like it's your first adventure you've been on with these multicolored followers. Ochi is the biggest change to the game. Riding on his back, giving him power-ups, and helping you battle everything in your path makes his addition to the game something meaningful. The Dandary sections of the game are a great way to add an extra challenge into the game, while also teaching you the valuable skill of multitasking outside of those challenges. Exploration feels smooth and rewarding as you trek every inch of those levels, and give you that desire to 100% each one. Hopefully we see more of these features in future games, if Nintendo decides to make a Pikmin 5. Fingers crossed though. One of my favorite aspects of the game is all the little details that go into exploring each area. Sounds of tiny footsteps and Pikmin whistling tunes from previous games and other Nintendo franchises are just some of the fine-tuned details that are small but make a big impact when creating so much immersion in a video game. Of course, like all my lists, this is just my opinion. There's a ton of games that could have easily been added, so there will probably be a sequel to this video for even more games. Some of Nintendo's best games aren't their biggest ones like Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey, so if you haven't played any of these games from this list, I can't recommend them enough. I hope Nintendo continues to deliver us bangers like these, especially with the Switch 2 right on the horizon. Let me know what games you'd have on your own list. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.